Bye for now. What? Is that seriously? Why can't I do this?
I'll print it out next time.
This is so weird. Every week. Okay. Coming up, Diageo launch global media review.
Who's the most hated man in media?
And finally, the issue of trust does not seem to go away. Hello and welcome to ID Comms Media Snack, episode 24. Today, some big news. The big pitch of the year so far, Diageo have just launched a global media agency review, which is worth about $2 billion, we think, in billings.
The most infamous man in media, John Mandel, was interviewed in a trade piece, which we're going to cover.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, in the last 7 days, two big industry names have come out with big, bold statements around trust and transparency. This is not something that's going away. We're going to look at what they're saying, why, and what it means. All coming up on today's ID Comms Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich. Okay, so first up, Diageo.
That's right.
One of the world's largest, or amongst the world's largest drinks manufacturers, has launched a global media agency review this week to the tune of about $2 billion in global spend.
That's right.
I think, as far as we know, Carat or Aegis Network is the main incumbent of that. Yeah. And they have some relationships with some other agencies in different parts of the world, but it's known as a Dentsu Aegis client, right?
Yeah. But this was the big one, right? We'd been waiting patiently in 2016 for a big global review to launch in the billions, and Diageo have come to play in quite a celebrated way. So Diageo, hugely respected, massive drinks business, has been very loyal, I think, to their media agency, for the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years. Yeah. When they have tendered in the past, it has been on a market-by-market basis. Yeah. I can't remember Diageo ever going to review globally, looking potentially to consolidate.
Well, they're one of the brands which we obviously keep a really good close eye on the pitch market because that's a dynamic. We keep an eye on it. We watch the trends. There are a few brands out there that we always think, well, they'll never pitch, right? Because there's such big, deep, ingrained relationships, and Diageo's always been in that box. Yeah, right. From years and years ago, we worked on an agency side, and that was always a client that you thought was, for some reason, just deeply tethered to Carat as a network.
Absolutely, and they enjoy priority status, I'd imagine, with most of their incumbent agencies. Anyway, they've gone to market with the big review of the year so far. It'll be well considered. It won't have been a decision, I think, that would have been rushed into. So they've been working on this for a while. All of the big holding groups, I think, are in play. They'll have invited most of them to play. It will be a massive prize for any of them to win. Yeah. It puts more pressure on Aegis. And remember, Aegis have finished the end of Mediapalooza with a net gain.
We did quite well last year.
Yes, their big global win of last year was Mondelez, and that was a great win. And they picked up lots of other bits and pieces and consolidated some business as well. So they'd had a really good 2016 on the back of a number of other previously good years. But suddenly 2016. Yeah. But this year they've struggled a little bit. So especially in the UK, they lost Asda, a piece of business that they'd had for 20 years. British Gas, which is also a very long-standing client of theirs in the UK, is currently in review. Yeah. And one of their flagship pieces of business in Diageo is looking to consolidate their business. So it's either win everything or lose everything. Yeah. So the pressure's going to be on the team.
And I think that the timing's interesting as well, because as you say, we've been anticipating a number of brands that we thought might review this year. Diageo's never really been on that consideration list. We wondered who would be the big, $1 billion plus advertiser that would launch a global consolidation review at this time. This is a year down the line from what was called the Mediapalooza. where insane amount of billings were in play at any one time. Now, as you say, it's a lot more considered.
Yeah.
I think given the what's going to happen over the next couple of months with things that we've talked about already, the ISBA's new media contract template, the ANA's media rebate study in the US. This is probably the time to launch a review of that scale. Diageo at the moment are going to be the brand that really puts these things to the test.
Yeah.
If there are questions over transparency or audit rights or programmatic or barter or any other kind of these areas where these various different lights are being shined and questions being asked, Diageo are now going to be the force of that.
And I think publicists will be licking their lips with glee at this one. They've been looking, I'd imagine, for a big global review. Highly credible, high prestige brand. They'll be probably going after this one.
To test that new,
I would imagine
new
so.
positioning.
And I don't think that this is going to be a cost-driven exercise from what I can gather. My instinct is that actually they'll have come to market with looking for perhaps a new blueprint, a new agency model.
Well, they say, because I was looking at the press release, so this is actually the quote from Diageo. It's about ensuring we are set up for the future and have the right agencies that can deliver in the fast-paced, globally integrated digital media landscape. So that suggests a brand that at least has got an idea of a blueprint, which we keep talking about, the blueprint for a new or new blueprint for a media agency. You'd hope, and that suggests that there is desire within Diageo to really go out now and test agency models to find the right model for them this year. It's going to be a biggie.
And we'll keep an eye on it. Next up, the most hated man in media.
Yeah, so who's that?
Not you, Tom.
Okay.
It's John Mandel, apparently.
I've been trying really hard.
So the former CEO of Mediacom in the US,
Yeah.
who a year ago, in a very infamous speech, stood up at the ANA conference.
Yeah.
And informed an entire delegation of US advertisers and procurement leads that actually the US advertising agencies had been demanding rebates in the US for years. And with that bombshell, all manner of chaos ensued.
Yeah, so that was really the catalyst for all of this kind of obsession about media transparency and rebates and everything for the last 12, 15 months in the US. But there's a really good article, an interview. John's been interviewed a few times, but he was interviewed by Mumbrella, Nick Christensen, who did a brilliant interview, got John talking about everything to do with kind of rebates and his perspective on it. We'll link to it. It's a long read, but it's well worth having a look at. It's very colourful. But I think with a year's year in between those initial kind of declarations that he made, and as he points out, he never finger pointed anyway. He didn't name names. He just suggested that this practice was going on. Yeah. And piqued the interest, I think, of clients for the first time in this space. But with a year down the line, so what the kind of things that he's saying? What? It's a big long read, but I mean, which bits for you jumps out?
Well, the first thing is what made me laugh is that he didn't intend that to be inflammatory in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have been anything else but inflammatory. But he's just kind of drawn it down even further, and in the interview he talks about programmatic buying and barter as kind of the key areas where he felt this kind of practice was going on. Yeah. He suggests that since that presentation a year ago, he's had a number of kind of very senior media agency leads tell him that this stuff goes on, but not by their agency, but by their competing agencies. Yeah.
Which is exactly what we find. I mean, it made us chuckle reading it because John was saying, to his face, agency execs would say, it's not us, it's all the other agencies. And then they'd go out publicly and try and discredit him and the ANA and everybody else. So there seems to be acknowledgement that everybody else is up to something except the person that's telling you. And we've had exactly the same thing, repeated conversations with heads of agencies who will spend a lot of time explaining to you,
reassuring us that they're up to only the best interests of clients, but the other agency is up to. And
they really will explain how the other agency manages their rebate practice, but they're totally transparent. So that's slightly entertaining at the moment. It's sad to hear that. Everybody seems to be in denial, and that's what he's saying is becoming a bit ridiculous. And we'll know in a few weeks. We'll have some reporting from K2 and Ubiquity,
but he was also
to shine a light.
In the interview, he was also very dismissive of the agencies that stand up and say, well, actually, it's not our fault. It's because we've been squeezed too tightly in terms of our margins by clients, or in particular by procurement teams within client organisations that are squeezing them in terms of fees. And his response to that is, well, let me negotiate better. How can agencies with all of their negotiating prowess allow themselves to be negotiated into a corner like that? So I mean, he challenges a lot of the conventional issues that perhaps some of the agency heads have been pushing back on the back of this of the transparency discussion. But it's a brilliant article and very lively in its discussion.
I think the most I think it's interesting. Obviously John kind of owns that topic, right? So he's the go-to person when talking about this because he was the catalyst for a lot of this conversation. But I think with that reflection, and he's a lot more philosophical, I think, about it now. And Nick's piece ends by quoting some things John had said, which are just quite sad to hear. That the danger in John's point of view, his perspective is that media agency practice is just obsessed with he calls it short-term money grab, and that he just says it's killing advertising, and it has an implication onto poor quality, lack of transparency, all of these things, and it's just not good for media agency business on a long term, which is stuff that we've kind of felt that sentiment, and I think we've shared with you before. What comes now? There will be a report. There has to be some form of, cleansing and building for the future, repairing of trust and transparency. Absolutely. Now. We've got to move forward because this short-term obsession that John talks about, if that is the case, it risks completely undermining the credibility and the business models, in fact, of media agencies around the world.
And the challenge should be led by the advertisers, but then embraced by the agencies.
So finally, it's continuing in the same theme, really. I don't think a week goes by where we don't talk about trust and transparency. But just in the last week, two very big names in the industry have come out with big, bold statements regarding trust and how important it is. And we'll link to these things. Keith Weed, who's the CMO of Unilever, arguably, one of the, if not the, kind of statesman for global marketing. Wrote a piece in the trade press over here saying that trust is the magic ingredient. He talks about long-term brand building for Unilever, and Unilever, they know brands, they own brands. He's saying trust is the magic ingredient, both from a building trust with a consumer, I guess, but also amongst agency rosters. And then just a matter of days later, in fact, at the interview I sat at in the US last week with Michael Roth, who said that the issue of transparency is paramount to the issue of trust between client and agency. It's unequivocal of how important trust and transparency is.
But aren't these two completely conflicting issues? So you've got a brand you've got a company like Unilever with lots and lots of trusted brands within their portfolio, insisting that the only way that they can grow in the future is by establishing that trust level between their brands and their consumers. Yet these brand leaders on the advertiser side are relying on their agencies to deliver that message, right? And yet the trust is broken between the two parties. How can that work? Which kind of links it back into Mr. Roth's kind of argument.
So as we've discussed a little bit about the trust, particularly in media agencies, is really at a low point, as evidenced by the transparency work, insight work and the research that we've done. As evidenced, we did a webinar yesterday on media transparency, which we can link to. It's worth a view as well. There seems to be low trust in agencies, but brands saying that trust is more important than ever. So which is a kind of weird disconnect. You'd think that you would then want to have deep trusted relationships with any external business that you work with, particularly the ones that sit between you and your consumers. So that's something I think that both of the, particularly Keith Weed, I think is calling out from his macro view of the global industry to say we need to trust our external partners.
And if anybody's got the power and the influence to perhaps drive that forward, it's the CMO of Unilever.
Yeah.
So
we should listen carefully to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.